can see lots of you are filtering, but I'll get started with the housekeeping. So hello everyone and welcome to this masterclass with BPP University, which is all about maximising your qualifying work experience. We're delighted to have you here with us today, and I'm going to be passing over to Johnny from BPP in a moment. But before we kick off, just want to run through our usual list of house rules. So first and foremost, do use the online question tool to post as many questions that you have, and I'll be posing them to Johnny and the panelists after the presentation. I'll be sending them to Johnny, but the earlier that you submit them, the more likely it is that you'll get a response. Please also use this tool to let us know if you have any audio-visual problems during the masterclass, and we'll do our best to help you. Please note this masterclass is being recorded before you ask, and the recording of the session will be sent to all registrants 24 hours after the session, and it will be available on our YouTube channel shortly afterwards too. Finally, we have lots more masterclasses upcoming over the next couple of weeks. For example, our next masterclass is on the 8th of May with Shoesmiths, and that's all about AI in the legal profession, which I'm really excited about. We also have our virtual bootcamp events for non-law students and first-year students next week, and these are designed to sort of give you vital legal careers information in bite-sized pieces. So do register if you're a non-law or a first-year student, and I'll include a link to those events in the follow-up email that you will receive tomorrow. Right, just going to run a couple of polls quickly so we have an idea of who we have here with us today. So first of all, could you just answer what stage you are at so we can then share that with our panelists here today? I will just give you 10 or so seconds to answer this. Right, interestingly enough, we have lots of postgrad students here with us today, which is interesting. Quite a few non-law and second, third year students, and also a few first years and a few who are graduated and employment, so a real spread there. And just our last question is, how are you planning on collecting your QWE? Just thought it'd be nice to check this out at the beginning. Are you thinking about doing multiple placements? Are you thinking that you just want to do it at one law firm, or are you not sure? And that's perfectly fine, because that's what we'll be probably covering a lot of today. So just going to give you 10 seconds to answer that, and this would be nice for our panelists to see as well. Great. Lots of you are not sure, and that's perfectly fine, and is actually equally split then between people who are thinking about doing multiple placements and those sort of wanting to do it in one place. Right, I'm going to hide that. Johnny, your slides are still up there, so that's all good, and I'm going to disappear now and hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Bethany, and thank you again for sharing your platform with us at BPP University Law School. We've got a really great panel for you to share from their experience in terms of how you, the audience, can maximise your qualifying work experience. But before you do, we're going to all introduce ourselves. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Johnny Hurst, the Head of Outreach at BPP University Law School. I was a partner in a city firm back in the day practicing in commercial property, but I spend most of my time these days running sessions like this and talking to my audience on my independent YouTube channel, SQE TV. Like and subscribe, please do. Anyway, let's move over to our esteemed panel if we could do. If we could start off with Olivia, if you'd like to introduce yourself, thank you.
Hello, nice to see everyone. So my name is Olivia Collicott. I look after all of our trainee solicitors at Flex Trainee. Flex Trainee is an SQE qualification scheme that's designed to support historically underrepresented and socially mobile aspiring solicitors. We recruit 2 cohorts of trainees per year as employees of Flex Trainee, and then we second them to various organisations in order to get their qualifying work experience. So we've got trainees, I think, at about 50 different organisations at the moment. So organisations including Vodafone, ASOS, Diageo, Unilever. They typically go on secondment for 2 years to get their 2 years QWE, and that can be made up of 1 2-year placement or 2 1-year placements. And whilst our trainees are completing their 2 years QWE, they also study for the SQE, and we fund the prep courses and exams as part of the programme. My role at Flex Trainee is to sort of make sure the trainees are happy and doing well, and sort of coordinate all efforts on the client side as well. We also have a paralegal resourcing business. So Flex Trainee is just sort of one part of Flex Legal, and we help paralegals and in-house teams or law firms connect where there's an interim resourcing need, and a lot of those paralegals will also be building up their QWE in that way as well. But obviously on that side of the business, we don't have any involvement in their qualification journey or fund exams or anything like that. So there's two sort of aspects to the business, but Flex Trainee is where I sit. So
Great.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Lauren, tell us about in-house legal solutions.
Hello, thank you for having me, Johnny and Bethany. Really appreciate it. My name's Lauren Cannon. I'm a co-founder of a legal business called In-House Legal Solutions. And what we do as a business is we are a group of ex-in-house lawyers, and we have paralegals and trainees and newly qualified lawyers who we train to be in-house lawyers. So our model is that we go into businesses and we act as their legal team, their internal legal team, or if a business has already got an internal legal team, but they're often very overstretched, under-resourced, we act as an extension of their legal teams. Now, we do that in two ways. We've got sort of, as I say, a group of in-house lawyers or people who've worked in-house before to do that, who are often very qualified people, but separately, we also train people to work sort of on commercial contracts, on legal optimization, on legal operations issues that businesses face. And we train paralegals and trainees and have training contracts to allow people to develop a slightly different career path in the legal industry. So it's still very contract based, it's still very corporate, commercial, working for big financial institutions and big businesses, just in a slightly different way, looking at in-house law as a product. And I'm the training principal at In-House Legal Solutions, and we've been going sort of 7 years. In those 7 years, we have seen 11 trainees come through, and in those years we have seen mostly people coming through on the LPC, but the world is changing, and that's why we're all here. We know about that, and so we're also seeing people now on the SQE doing their qualified work experience, and we're just sort of experiencing that as a business ourselves, and as someone who supports the careers of people on that ladder, on that first rung. So hopefully I can share some insights on that today.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Lauren. And Andrea.
Yes, thank you very much, Johnny, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Gallo. I'm the HR manager at Accu Trainee. I'm responsible for the employee lifecycle management at Accu Trainee, but I'm also deeply involved in the trainee selection process at Accu Trainee, as I conduct HR interviews, and I also regularly keep in touch and interact with students and candidates during events, career fairs, and presentations. I also would like to describe Accu Trainee in a nutshell, if that's okay. Accu Trainee launched in 2012 with the revolutionizing idea of disrupting barriers in the legal profession. We introduced an innovative model which practically pioneered qualifying work experience, which is what we're discussing today, QWE itself, as we employ trainee solicitors and we send them out on secondments to a variety of different law firms and in-house legal teams. We offer our trainee solicitors guidance, support, mentoring to make sure they become well-rounded lawyers at the end of their journey. Candidates can apply with us throughout the year with no deadlines, and training contracts can start as quickly as 2 weeks after the assessment center. We have a strong track record, having helped hundreds of candidates experience quality work during their secondments and always achieving at least one NQ offer at the end of their training contracts. I'll be more than happy to tell you much more about this as we continue with the webinar, but thank you very much again, Johnny.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And we've very much had a focus so far on how you might get yourself a QWE placement. We thought it would be really important also to hear from somebody who's actually in a QWE role at the moment. Enter stage left, Chloe. Chloe, tell us about your role at the moment and how you got there.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. So I am a recent graduate of BPP University. I undertook my LLM/SQE preparation course with BPP. And during that time, I volunteered with the BPP Legal Advice Clinic, which is a pro bono service that offers housing, welfare, all kinds of things to the people of the UK. And afterwards, they let us know that there is an opportunity to do a 6-month placement with them and get some qualifying work experience as a trainee. And I applied for it and fortunately got it. And here I am. I'm in week 3 of my placement and I've been very busy, loving it. And yeah, a bit of my background, I did my LLB at Durham University, graduated in 2022, did the SQE in 2023, so I'm sure that I'm only just a little bit older than most of the people on this call. I'm just maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, and I'm happy to talk you through my experience.
Great stuff. And just to be clear, it's the 6-month placement. We have 5 6-month placements at BPP that we offer to students each year who are graduates of the SQE, because we really want to support our students into the QWE world of work and building a portfolio of QWE, which is one of the options that you can do up to 4 employers. Just before we start the discussion itself, I just wanted to share this particular slide, or a couple of slides really, just to explain what the SQE pathway is, because I know a number of people who engage in these webinars are coming to this for the first time, and therefore if you know this already, I'm only going to spend a minute really explaining where QWE fits into the new qualification pathway, the SQE. So you start off with, in most cases, a law degree or a non-law degree. It doesn't have to be a law degree anymore. We at BPP say that you really need to do a conversion course before you do the SQE, but that's not the approach of everybody. You have to pass SQE1 before you can do SQE2. SQE1 is a multiple choice assessment, quite a rigorous one. Not going to spend any time talking about that. Suffice to say, when you do your research, you'll find how challenging it is. If you pass SQE1, you can then move on to SQE2, which are 16 mini skills assessments. And at some stage in your journey, it doesn't have to be after you've done the SQE exams themselves. You could do it before, during, or after. You have to complete what's known as 2 years worth of qualifying work experience. And you can do that in up to 4 employers. Historically, candidates have got the opportunity to do a 2-year training contract when they did the LPC at a single employer, whereas it's much more flexible now. You can put it together in up to 4 employers. It needs to be signed off by a solicitor or the compliance officer for legal practice in the law firm or the company you are working for, and it doesn't involve any assessment of competence anymore, more that you've had the opportunity to work towards what we call these solicitor competencies that are published by the SRA, and then subject to a satisfactory, or if you pass the satisfactory character and suitability test, you can be admitted as a solicitor if you completed all of those. Now, what I'm going to do is to unshare my screen now, so we all appear a little bit bigger. I think that will work now. Has my screen now miraculously disappeared, folks? And we're all very much bigger. Yeah, my view is slightly different to yours. Right, let's get started then. So if I could start maybe with Olivia, and we'll bring in Lauren and Andrea. I've often heard that candidates really need a strategy to approach their qualifying work experience if they haven't got themselves a sponsored 2-year training contract. What's your view on that, and how should a candidate approach QWE when they're sort of thinking about their journey, assuming that they don't get a training contract from a firm that's going to sponsor them for the whole 2 years?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say the most important thing is really to keep a record. Obviously, it's something that the SRA recommends, and they have templates on their website, I think, as to how you can keep a track of your QWE. We have sort of a house style that all of our trainees work to that we find really helps with keeping track of what competencies they're hitting and making sure that we're sort of reassessing throughout their QWE that they're reaching out into different types of work and ticking off those competencies. But also I think it's just a really good practice to keep a journal of what you're doing, regardless of whether it's QWE or not. But I think a monthly journal or a bi-weekly journal is a really great way of keeping on top of what you have done, what you've achieved, and what you still need to do in that QWE, particularly if you're moving from place to place and you're not doing it all in one business. It's good to have that sort of moving, rolling document to keep up with what work you were doing. We have a tool on our website that's free to use for anyone. You don't need to be a flex trainee, where you can use a journal, and it sort of automatically sends the journal to your supervisor to sign off. I also think the journals are a really great tool when you come up to qualification as well. They're essentially your CV at that point, and you can just pull out lots of information and formulate an amazing CV showing sort of what value you've offered to these organisations over the last 2 years. So I would say really the most important thing important piece of advice I would give, and also that we sort of reinforce with our trainees at Flex is to keep a really solid record of what you're doing.
Great, that's a great bit of advice. And I think there's a template also on the SRO's website, so no end of choice for you to choose from there. Lauren, how would you advise somebody who's maybe coming along to QWE then, in terms of the strategy to choose? Obviously, and then if they've decided, yeah, in-house works for me, how do you get them to make a decision that's right for them?
I think a strategy is a good idea. I don't think that if you haven't got one, that it's sort of, it's a complete obstacle. I think if you're not going to one particular place and you know that you're going to get your set 2 years, then you know that you've got an option to get sort of bits of work experience, up to 4 providers, and it depends on where you're located. It depends on what kind of work that you want to get, and if it's specifically in-house. Sometimes that can be a little bit more difficult to find out which businesses, for example, will actually take on a trainee or somebody that potentially, might be in a paralegal or a legal assistant role. And if that goes well, they may sort of want to formalise that more into a training contract. It is worth pointing out, though, that ultimately there's a definition or description of what qualified work experience is that the SRA has put together. And even if you're not necessarily sort of being sponsored to get it by a business, just because somebody is not doing it in that official capacity doesn't actually mean that it's not qualified work experience. So there have been some sort of articles in the press of places saying, oh, this wasn't really, we weren't really sponsoring you, and that's actually not the case. If you can satisfy the requirements, that actually does count, and you can do it overseas, as I think Johnny's slide mentioned. So the options to get it are potentially more varied than you necessarily might think if you don't have that sort of set sponsorship for 2 years for one firm. And so absolutely having a strategy on that is going to help. And potentially if you want to target certain places, like you really want to target in-house, or potentially you want to target a really big law firm, then it's about researching what kind of businesses actually offer the opportunity for you to come in and sort of be able to get the type of experience that ticks that SRA box.
Good stuff. Andrea, over to you. What would you advise in terms of a strategy to, because with AccuTrainee, you can place people in individual 6-month slots in various different secondments, and so how do you piece together a portfolio QWE?
Yeah, I mean, before I describe our portfolio, Johnny, I wanted to mention, I agree with what Lauren mentioned in terms of strategy being important. I would say demonstrating a strategy is important. I mean, at least as much as important as what planning everything else in life is. It's about being mindful of what you're doing and being careful about it. It's not just doing all the QWE that comes along, but also focusing on the quality of work or the areas of law you will cover. So, for example, if you're absolutely set, you want to be a commercial lawyer, don't spend 8 months doing criminal law in a law firm and making that count as your QWE. So strategy in that sense is important. And regarding the portfolio, we've used the 12 years and more experience that we have in helping trainees through their training contract to build Pathways, which is our platform that we developed from scratch, which enables candidates and trainee solicitors to register their QWE, keeping track of the competencies they need to gain against the SRA list of solicitor competencies that you mentioned earlier, Johnny. This is something that our trainees use on a regular basis to add information about their portfolio, which is reviewed by the training principal and by the mentors that they meet with every month. But also, it's something that any trainee solicitor in the UK can use for free by accessing our website.
Great stuff. And there are sort of pros and cons, I suppose, of doing a 2-year qualifying work experience at one single firm that looks very much like a conventional LPC training contract. What are the pros and what are the cons of going for one of those, or going for a portfolio qualifying work experience makeup? Maybe we can start with Lauren this time. Oh, we lost
Hi,
you.
sorry.
Okay.
My computer went on mute for a second. What's the pros and cons? I mean, the real pro, I think, is that if you are at a firm and you've had that sort of 2-year sponsorship, you are very likely to have had experience in an area that you would then want to sort of qualify into. And you know, if you say, it depends on, you know, firms do it in different ways, but if it's sort of a bit more of a traditional seat rotation type, you know, which is quite similar in structure to, you know, the old LPC would have been like in terms of training contract structure, then it's likely that one of those areas will be an area that you will then want to sort of progress for the rest of your career. And I think that what is almost not a con, but potentially we might see in the future is if people are sort of getting different sort of pockets of work experience from different areas of laws or different law firms or businesses, that when they actually choose and think, okay, I really want to do this particular property, for example, that if your experience in property is only been quite limited, then that might mean it's a struggle for you to get a job on qualification in that particular area. The flip side, of course, is that the more variety you have and the more experience you have in that 2-year period to get the qualification and to get the experience, the better rounded lawyer you might be. So if you spend, you know, all of your qualifying work experience just focused on one particular area, you might actually end up thinking, oh, you know, I did this, but actually it's not really what I want to do. And so it's finding the balance. It's finding, you know, it's thinking about, not just thinking about the training contract, but thinking about qualification ahead and working back from that and working out, okay, what do I want to do on qualification? So if I want to do this particular thing, I should try and get this type of experience.
Good. Just before we bring in Chloe to find out, well, what's her strategy been going forward, maybe we could just hear briefly from Olivia and Andrea. Maybe Andrea first on this one. So you've got the QWE portfolio, you've got the 2-year training contract. We've heard from Lauren that, you know, you need to curate that portfolio in such a way that makes you employable. Can you give any sort of examples and
Yes.
sort of advice in relation to how to optimize that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question, QWE portfolio with 4 firms as opposed to 1. I mean, my take on that is I agree with what Lauren mentioned. Ultimately, I would say the pros and cons really depend on you as an individual. For example, if you're not sure on what area of law you want to specialize in as an NQ, then of course variety is beneficial in that sense, because you may experience different areas of law, different environments. However, if with QWE in one firm or one organization may be suitable to candidates who know exactly what they want for when they qualify, the area of law they want to specialize in. So it really depends on the case. But I also want to say that the benefits of variety, in my opinion, refer to the variety of experiences, both in terms of practice areas, environments, for example, covering both private practice and in-house. And a varied QWE may also determine a more varied skill set, also better adaptability, more resilience, emotional intelligence, and a better understanding of what the future as an NQ may entail. And that's what we've experienced with most of our trainees. Finally, I would say most importantly, the key word is not just variety, but also bespoke, and tailoring the QWE around your needs, your preferences, your experience. And that's what we focus on here at Accu Trainee, a bespoke QWE, and offering a bespoke QWE to our trainees.
Great stuff. Olivia, just I could put a slight different spin on this, and feel free to add whatever you wanted to. You don't have to stop at 2 years for your QWE and just say, oh, it's 2 years, I'm now going to apply. If that portfolio doesn't hang together, it's not cohesive, you could do 2.5, even 3 years, couldn't you? There's no one telling you you've got to apply after 2 years if that portfolio doesn't make you as attractive as you could be as an NQ. So would you encourage people to get as many experiences as they can do and not necessarily just stop at 2 years?
Yeah, definitely. So our program is a 2-year program because that's what you need as a minimum. But we have people who join us who've already got some QWE, and we would absolutely not, discourage people to apply to us. And I'm sure, the other organisations that are similar would do that. But yeah, absolutely. As much as you can get, if you want to get more experience in a certain area, or you're finding that applications aren't successful, you've maybe not got the right experience for the right role that you want. I think that's one of the benefits of the sort of the SQE QWE route is that it is a lot more flexible, and you can sort of design it however you want to design it, and you've got the option to sort of tailor your experience to the area that you want to go into.
Great stuff, thank you. Chloe, let's bring you in. So you've done your SQE. Your first 6-month QWE placement is in BPP's pro bono clinic. Maybe you should tell us first a little bit about what you're doing there. It'd be quite interesting in a bit more detail, and then what your plans are going forward in terms of how you'll go into the open market and pick up the remaining QWE.
Sure. So, well, a clinic is quite a fast-paced environment, especially the BPP Legal Advice Centre. We see quite a fast overturn of clients. Full disclosure, I've only been here 3 weeks, but in that time, I've already dealt with around about 6 clients, and some will be ongoing as we prepare court documents and so much for them. I specifically work in the housing clinic, so we're in a housing crisis, which is lovely. So we see a lot of people, and we see, for example, a lot of rent increases, a lot of homeless applications, and we work very, very closely with people. And I think if you're very much interested in working closely with clients, meeting new clients almost every week, then I'd say a clinic is something that you should consider, because that's exactly that type of environment. In terms of going forward, I would just to start by saying to maybe the undergraduates listening, when I graduated university, I definitely did not have a 8-point plan of how I was going to go forward. I don't think you should be terribly frightened if you're not entirely sure of where you want to go. I think a lot of people are in that situation. And I found that when studying my SQE, when you start to get down to more practical application of the law, it kind of starts to become a bit more clearer in your mind. So don't be too frightened. I think it's okay to not, know how your future will turn out just quite yet. But for myself, during this placement, I have really found to love kind of social welfare and, promoting access to justice for people within the UK. So my strategy going forward is definitely more pro bono work. I do want to get some experience in a law firm, which is why I think the QWE route is so useful for me in terms of the portfolio, because I get to try different things. Personally as well, I want to try maybe different cities. So if you're someone like me and you're a bit of a nomad in that sense, then it's great for you because you get that flexibility. So your strategy going forward, I'm mostly putting in applications now for pro bono centres. They don't recruit quite 2 years in advance like a law firm does, so that's a bit more of a rolling thing. But I have also applied to some law firms for a 2025 start, which would be then just the end of my QWE. And as you said, if it goes over 2 years, I'm not really fussed. I'm quite open to just experiencing everything before I decide. Sorry, that was really long, but I hope
that
answered those
was a great
questions.
answer. It was a great answer. I think it's fair to say that, and I think the panel you'll probably agree with this, that a lot of people will come to employers with a certain amount of QWE, yet the employer will say, we still want you to work our 2-year training contract, or well, we still want you to do a full 2 years with us. Chloe's said she's very flexible in that regard, quite happy to do that. Certainly my recommendation is, if you've got 2 years offer in the bag and they say they want you to do the full 2 years, then do it. It's all good experience. You're going to get paid a salary. Whether you qualified now or whether you qualify in 6 months' time really matters not. Let's move on. Just the last question in the first section, if I can do, folks, because this is for Olivia, Andrea, and Lauren. Just so to give an idea of how the model for your individual organisations works, because you all place candidates in slightly different ways to slightly different organisations. How does the model work? Who employs the trainee and who supervises them and gives them appraisals? So start off with Andrea, maybe we'll start with you.
Yes, thank you, Johnny. The AccuTrainee model is simple. We employ trainee solicitors, as I mentioned earlier, and we second them to both law firms and in-house legal teams. We run the selection process first. We take the trainees through a robust, rigorous selection process. Once they're successful, we have a few conversations with them. We ask them to complete a few forms in order to understand their specific preferences in terms of favorite areas of law, the environments they want to join, and we try and offer them opportunities that are suitable to those requirements. Once a trainee secures their first secondment, we would employ them and second them to the client organization. We don't just employ the trainee and send them to the organization and say, okay, see you at the end of your secondment. We actually monitor the trainee development very thoroughly with our mentoring program. As I mentioned earlier, each trainee is assigned to a qualified lawyer who acts as a mentor for those trainees, and we have ex-partners of Magic Circle firms, experienced in-house lawyers mentoring our trainees, meeting with them every month, ensuring that the trainees are getting good quality work experience, they're getting the skills they need in order to become a well-rounded lawyer, assessing their portfolio, but also the trainees benefit from socials, networking events, bespoke trainings. They get the support from the training principal at AccuTrainee, and of course from the HR team. The appraisals also take place with the trainees and with the seconding organization. Trainees can experience up to 4 different secondments with AccuTrainee. Normally, a secondment would be 6 months long, but there are also trainees that have done a training contract with us. They could be, let's say, with us covering only one seconding organization. So there is no one size fits all approach. It really depends on the case, and each training contract develops and is shaped around the trainee's needs and preferences.
Great.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Olivia, how does the position vary with Flex?
So fairly similar model. Obviously our scheme is focused on social mobility, so that's sort of one of the key elements of our selection and recruitment process, is we assess whether an individual is socially mobile. So really what we're looking at doing with that is giving people opportunities to get their foot through the door where they may not have had the same opportunities as people from non-socially mobile backgrounds. So we look at things like, we essentially look at the government's Social Mobility Commission measurement tool, and we use that to sort of inform us as to whether someone is socially mobile. So that's sort of a big part of our recruitment process. But yeah, they go through our recruitment and selection process. They are then sent on secondment. We have similarly mentoring, bi-monthly training, socials. They join as part of a cohort, so they'll have sometimes they'll be have one trainee at, say, Shell, and they don't have that sort of cohort that they would otherwise get in a big law firm. So we try and sort of group them together so that they've got a cohort that's not necessarily at that organisation, but they can sort of share ideas and share tips, and get together and complain about their day at work, or whatever it may be. So we do that. Yeah, I think much sort of quite similar to what Andrea.
So you employ the trainees. They're actually the Flex's employee. Okay, that makes sense. And are mentored and supervised in a similar way in terms of their careers.
Just to complicate things, we do have another sort of part of Flex trainees. So I would say 95% of our trainees are employed by us and sent on secondment. We do have part of the Flex trainee scheme, which is called Flex Talent Development. And that's where an organisation will come to us and say, you know, we've got a paralegal. We absolutely love them. We want to support them through to qualification, but we don't have the infrastructure or knowledge to be able to put in place a robust enough training plan. And so then they sort of they stay employed by that business as a paralegal / trainee, but they hop into a Flex cohort and sort of get all the benefits of being a Flex trainee, but without being employed by Flex. So there are sort of two ways of doing it. The majority.
I understand. Yeah, great. Thanks. And Lauren, how does it work at In-House Legal Solutions?
So we are a law firm, so we are authorised by the SRA to be able to train people to become solicitors. So our current model is that we don't advertise our training contracts externally. We have paralegal opportunities, which are for either people who have done postgraduate courses, and you know, historically that might have been things like the LPC and the BBC, the GDL, or of course people are now coming out of university. You know, they were just graduated from their undergraduate courses, and they join us at those stages as a paralegal, and we have sort of, you know, every year we have an opportunity for people internally to apply for a training contract. So they stay employed with us. They were employed by us when they were a paralegal, similar to the current system, which allows you what's called time to count. So if you'd already been a paralegal somewhere else, or a legal assistant, or got experience elsewhere, you can discount 6 months or up to 6 months of your training contract, and we've always offered that to our paralegals when they start on their training contract. I believe that's still an option with qualified work experience, provided that you can evidence that you still gained that work experience before you are on any sort of formal training contract or apprenticeship scheme, or however it's structured. So our trainees still are able, because they were a paralegal, they're still able to evidence that they've got qualified work experience over the period of time that they need it for the purposes of qualification. So our trainees are very much supported through their training contract once they are successful on it. We have sort of regular one-to-ones, mentoring sessions, and we have a training program. Our trainees move from being in one specific area of the business to being able to expand their knowledge on more than one area of the business. So we work quite a lot with big financial institutions, and that's where our paralegals sort of train. So they learn how to draft, they learn how to negotiate, they learn how to utilise legal skills that you need as a qualified lawyer, all with a view for, once you are qualified, that you've had the opportunity to get the right skills to do that job. I think lots of people sometimes see the training contract as this sort of golden chalice that they must get, and once you've got your training contract, you're home and dry. It's rather the opposite. The training contract really is a process of getting to the point where once you're qualified, you're in a good position to be able to start from there and then work your way up during your career. So it's very much a process. It's very much using your training contract time to build up the skills you need, and sometimes they're legal skills. They can be things like things like drafting, things like client interviewing, things like process and rules and regulations. But it's also sort of people skills, how you deal with clients. What can you do if you're in a difficult negotiation, and how do you deal with that? That's all part of what a training contract should be about, is using that time during that contract period, during that qualified work experience period, to give you the best start to your qualified legal career.
Great stuff. Thank you. Chloe, if we can move on to the sort of second section now, and we'll spend 5 or so minutes on this in the final section. Is it possible to do the SQE whilst you're doing qualifying work experience? I know that you've done the SQE first and then QWE, but because I know a lot of people want to qualify as soon as possible, and they're thinking, well, I can work full-time, do the SQE part-time, or maybe even try and do it full-time. What would your advice be for somebody who's studied the SQE as a full-time student?
I would say that to study for the SQE and work full-time, you would have to be quite a special human being. Not to discourage anyone, but personally, I've never seen somebody do it successfully. I myself studied for the SQE1 full-time, and it's like having a full-time job, and then you work in the evenings, and then you study over the weekend. It is quite a large exam, and I wouldn't underestimate it. So, to be honest, I'd probably say no. That would be my most honest answer. You could maybe study
a full-time course, certainly, but possibly a part-time course. Just out of interest, Olivia, Flex have obviously a number of trainees going through the system. When do they tend to pick up the SQE? Do they do it part-time alongside? And how successful has that been for them so far?
It's really, really tough. So it's a really intense 2 years. So definitely not for the faint-hearted. So we enroll them onto preparation courses, and they recommend, I think it's between 10 to 15 hours study a week. As part of their sort of full-time employment contract with Flex, all of the trainees get a half a day a week to study, to sort of put towards that study time, but we would recommend sort of evenings and weekends as well. And they also, if they're an apprentice, so we do have apprentices as well who go through a level 7 solicitor apprenticeship, and also sit the SQE exams, which is the next level of study time every week, but they get a full day because it's an apprenticeship. They'll get a full day to study. But we use a preparation course by a provider called Barbary that people may have heard of, and it's very much designed to be sort of taken alongside full-time work, but they do shorter courses that can be done. Obviously, if you're not working full-time and you've got the time to study, you could probably do it a little bit quicker, but the courses that our trainees do are just that bit longer, because obviously it needs to be spread over a longer period of time. But yeah, definitely, they are tough exams, so it's a big commitment.
So presumably you've had sort of mixed results, like the national results have been mixed. Some have got through, some have not. And I think we shouldn't overestimate I'm putting words in your mouth here, but presuming not everyone passes first time, do they, Olivia?
No, definitely not. So I don't know. I sort of shy away from looking at anything to do with the SQE the last 2 weeks. But I think the national pass rate, the last sort of cohort of exam takers was something like 53%. So it is, definitely a really challenging exam. We are above that, so we're quite in quite a good position. But I think we've got to sort of take that with a pinch of salt, because that will probably be a lot of people who are, putting themselves through the SQE exams without a preparation course, without, support. So I think that's probably why ours are a little bit higher than that, because obviously we've got the prep courses in place and the support for our trainees. But yeah, not everyone passes first time.
Cool. Andrea, what's your view on sort of the work study combination, and how do you guide your trainees through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say our approach is a bit less rigid, a bit more flexible than Flex, if you let me say that, in the sense that we don't have let's say a one-size-fits-all approach with regards to the when to do the SQE and with who to do the SQE. We partner with a variety of providers for the SQE prep courses for our trainees, including BPP or the one that Olivia mentioned. But all our trainees that do the SQE at some point obviously have to do the assessments. There are some candidates that join us having completed SQE1 and doing the QWE full-time and then simultaneously preparing for SQE2. As Chloe rightly mentioned, it's not a walk through the park. It's very demanding to combine a full-time role as a trainee solicitor and the SQE preparation. We've been helping trainees, even with the period of recognized training, doing the training contract full-time and the LPC part-time. So it can be done. We've had many trainees doing the LPC and the training contract full-time, and now we have trainees doing the SQE prep courses whilst they do the QWE. We offer trainees support to do that, but ultimately it really depends on the trainee's preference when they want to do the exams. We have, for example, trainees that prefer to complete 6 or 12 months of QWE, then prepare for the SQE full time. But we also have trainees, as I said, that do both simultaneously. And the advantage of that is that obviously you can potentially qualify straight away after the 2-year QWE. As I said, we don't have a rigid approach in that sense. We are happy to consider each situation on a case-by-case basis, even with our scholars, the trainees that are actually sponsored by AccuTrainee to complete the SQE prep courses and assessments. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. We're sort of into the last 15 or so minutes of the session. I'm keen to sort of get through into the last section if we can do. Lauren, obviously you've employed a number of people, as you mentioned earlier, through to qualify as solicitors. What stands somebody out in the application process to an employer like yourself saying, yeah, this is a good candidate? Because I think a lot of people on this call are anxious to know, well, what will make a difference in my application, or what do I need to do to stand out? Is there any tips you could have? And then maybe I'll go around to Andrea and Olivia as well, and then maybe talk to Chloe to find out how she managed to land her role. So Lauren, what makes a good candidate stand out?
Well, there's so many facets to it, and I think that the key is what is a good candidate to one business will be different to what's a good candidate to another business, and that's because, and this you know, if you're going to take sort of one tip away from me today, it's focus on the business that you're applying to. And making that it's specific to them. So if you know that you're applying to a firm that only does employment law, for example, you know, if you're saying in your application form, oh, I'm really not sure what I want to do, you know, I'd like to try a different variety of things, or I really know I want to be a housing lawyer. Well, that's automatically someone's going to read that and say, why are you applying here? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but what makes a really good application, and this applies whether it's paralegal stage, or whether it's you know, to get some work experience, or whether it's to start a training contract, or even when you're at your NQ stage and potentially you've got all that work experience and you're now trying to get that solicitor role, that job. It's about knowing what the business does that you're applying to, the law firm or the in-house team, and saying to them, you know, I know you do this. You know, in my firm, for example, we do mostly sort of corporate, commercial, investment fund work. And, you know, we've got loads of information on our website about what we do and who we are and the type of business we are, and the fact that it's in-house law, which is different to private practice. And if people come along to us and say, well, this is what I want to do, you know, I've been really interested in in-house work, but I also really want to get all the skills of contract drafting, that's somebody who's clearly going to flourish in our environment, because it's what we do. And if it's somebody that comes along and says, well, actually, you know, I really want to be a criminal lawyer, I just can't get any work experience, well, that's not, you know, it's not of use. And that doesn't make a good application. So I would say just do the research, make sure you know where you're applying to, regardless of whether it's an experience, training contract, paralegal stage, whatever it is, and tailor it and say, I know you're doing this, and, you know, have a look at what the firms are doing. Some of them are giving conferences and you know, attending tech talks, or they are going off and doing lots of social mobility or pro bono activities. And, you know, if they are doing that, that's part of the culture, part of the values of that particular firm. And you can go along and you can say, well, you know, I really like the, you know, you partner with X charity for your pro bono work because I'm really interested in this and this. You know, that's the sort of person that will suit that firm, and that makes you as a candidate really attracted to that business. So I think spending that time at any stage of your career is vital to being successful.
Right. Thank you. Olivia, what would you like to add? When you're taking on people for Flex, obviously there's the social mobility criteria. We'll take that as a given, and that's obviously very important. You're doing great work in this space, and yeah, many people like me who are social mobility allies here. can't get enough of people like Flex in this space helping out with social mobility. Let's put that to one side for a moment. What else are you looking for in a candidate to take them on at Flex?
Yeah, so we obviously have our recruitment and selection process. Once you're sort of through that, you're in our pool of future trainees, and then you also interview with businesses that are potential supervisors and secondment opportunities. So there's sort of two parts there. So I think what we look for in our recruitment process, which is the first part of that, is I would say the biggest thing is emotional intelligence, enthusiasm, motivation. One of our values is being human at Flex, and I think that's the reason a lot of businesses work with us, is because we're just quite sort of, I suppose, down to earth people and honest. So I think being human is a really key thing for us. So that's what we look for in the recruitment process. And I think it's important to say as well that you'd be applying for a training opportunity. So there's no expectation going in that you have, tons and tons of experience in different areas. So if you can go into an interview and say, I'm really, really passionate about working in house, I want to be a commercial lawyer, you don't necessarily have that experience, but you show that you're passionate about it and you are going to take every opportunity during this training contract. I think that's the most important thing, to take on a trainee, particularly for an in-house team, where it's not sort of part and parcel of their business model, is a massive, massive investment. So they just want to make sure that they're taking someone on who is going to, take the opportunity for everything it's worth. So I think definitely emotional intelligence, enthusiasm, motivation, and drive are absolutely key for us.
Great stuff. Andrea, you mentioned an assessment centre forms part of your recruitment process. So what in particular, without giving the game away, what sort of skills are AccuTraining looking for in somebody who attends that assessment centre?
Yes, thanks, Ernie. That's exactly where I wanted to start, because there are a number of skills and competencies that make a good lawyer, and we run our selection process to identify candidates that can demonstrate those fundamental technical skills that solicitors need to be successful. And those, of course, include attention to detail, analytical skills, teamwork skills, but also commercial awareness, emotional intelligence, as Olivia mentioned earlier, but also what I wanted to say in line with what Lauren mentioned, what we ultimately looking for is candidates that can demonstrate a strong passion for this career, drive, commitment, and an action plan to achieve their objectives. What is really important, as Lauren mentioned, is to show a keen interest to join that specific firm, that specific organization. So to tailor your application, tailor what you say during the interview to that organization, demonstrate research, and demonstrate that you are the candidate that they should choose rather than many others that apply. So that will make you stand out. And finally, very briefly, these selection processes for trainee solicitor placements, paralegal roles, ultimately require candidates to get used with certain interview techniques and practices. For example, we often see candidates that are very strong on paper, that have gained previous great experiences, but then they can't, for example, complete a competence-based interview. And that is important, having those experiences, because you need to demonstrate you've gained those skills during a selection process. So that's something I wanted to mention. Make sure you research what the selection process will entail, what will be tested and how, and practice before the interview with those questions and anything else that may be assessed.
Brilliant. And for competency-based interviews, most of you will probably know this, but those who don't, look up STAR technique, STAR, and that will give you the best way to structure your answers to competency-based questions. Thumbs up there from Andrea. Thank you. Before we go and answer a few questions, just going to ask Chloe to reflect really on why you think you managed to secure your role, and often it's making yourself stand out. And we did discuss yesterday, and I was very impressed by the commitment you'd shown to the pro bono centre that you applied to before you actually applied for the role. What did you do to help you stand out in the application process?
So when I approach applications, I always have three things that I try and hit, and they just about cover what everyone has already spoken about. But firstly, as Lauren mentioned, research is very important. You need to know who you're applying for, and they want to know that you know who they are. It's competitive, so you do need to put effort in. So I researched the BPP Legal Advice Clinic. I knew that to be able to get the role, you had to volunteer with them beforehand. And I wanted to do that anyways. It's great experience for the SQE2, so win-win. So I put in a lot of effort into it, and I worked with about 5 clients while I was studying, and built up a rapport with my supervising solicitor, and I think that obviously really helps. The second thing I would say is, when people are reading applications, I'm sure, as everyone on this call can agree, they start to blend together because you get so many of them. And I got a really good piece of advice from a mentor saying, put something on your application that's a little bit random in a way, but kind of shows who you are. I am a delegate for the UN Women UK. I go to the Commission on the Status of Women every year. And it has nothing to do with the legal world, but I put it on anyways because it's memorable. And then the third thing I would say is, as Olivia mentioned and Andrea, is show your passion. I'm someone who can get quite enthusiastic, and instead of tempering that, I show my personality in the application. And you may feel a bit silly, but just show who you are. I think it's really worth it. So yeah,
that's the point that Olivia mentioned earlier about showing that you're human, but also showing that you're unique as well, and identifying what makes you unique. Brilliant. Well, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes to go. Now's the time really to punt any questions into the chat. I will go to each of the panelists at the very end, so you're on notice now to give me a one-liner as a top tip for securing QWE. If you could just hold on to that thought for a moment. I'm just looking at the questions that have come in so far. One is that says, I'm due to study the LPC this coming September. Is my only option to complete a 2-year training contract at one law firm, or can my training be across 4 different employers? Really, really good question. And the answer is either. If you can get a conventional LPC training contract, then do so. Then, because that will mean you do not have to go down the SQE route at all. But if you cannot secure a conventional LPC training contract, you can qualify through a transitional provision where you can do QWE at up to 4 different employers for 2 years. But, this is a big but, you would have to pass SQE2 as well. So ideally, if you're doing the LPC, make sure you can secure, if you can do a traditional LPC training contract. It will avoid having to go down the SQE route. Okay, are there any other questions, Bethany, that have come through that we can share with the group?
Yes, I've got a couple here. Someone has asked, which I think you might have covered. So could work as a paralegal or legal aid count towards QWE? I can answer that, yes.
Yeah, we'll all nod on that, absolutely. It's all about achieving those competencies, isn't it? As long as it's mapping to at least 2 of the competencies that the SRA have published. I can see the questions now. I didn't scroll down.
You've got some more there. Yeah, a few came in earlier, so do feel free to pick.
Yeah, that's there's a good one. I'm in my final year. I've been offered a role with a local authority as a legal officer. How can I confirm whether the role constitutes qualifying work experience and whether my line manager would be willing to sign off my experience? Is there any information I should send over them to inform them of the process or the criteria? I don't know if anybody on the panel wants to say that. I
would say ask them.
Yeah. That's the simple question, isn't it? Go to them. If somebody is being employed in a local authority, go on.
I think, as far as I'm aware, and check the SRA website, but I don't think employers are really. I don't think they really should be able to say no. If it fits into the definition of what QWE is that it's work and it's in the legal space, then I think they would be a bit naughty to say no to confirming it as QWE.
Yeah, and the SRA have made it very clear that firms shouldn't and won't be allowed to say no. And I know that a lot of some of the so-called elite firms, when the SQE was originally announced, were a bit sniffy about wanting to dilute the currency of their training contracts by allowing, in the inverted commas, paralegals to qualify. It's the new game now. Everyone realizes that this is now possible, and yeah, firms have started to come round to that. But no, they shouldn't be able to say no, absolutely not. couple more questions come in here. As an LLM graduate, is there a possibility of becoming a solicitor through being a paralegal and then partaking the training contract without having to study the LPC or the SQE? Sorry, it's almost impossible. There's no shortcuts, and LLM won't buy you anything other than a really good additional qualification. You have to go through the same process as everyone else, I'm afraid. Here's a good question for the panel. Is doing a placement year during your law degree a good idea, even if you don't get to choose the particular type of firm, and would it count as QWE? Does anybody want to take that? A placement year during your university degree?
I'm happy to chip in. I don't know the answer about whether it counts. I think there is a time limit potentially on, you know, when you've got to have the experience, and if you're doing a sandwich year and then you, depends on how long your course is and things like that. I'm not sure. Maybe that's something to check. But I know some of the universities actually are sort of starting to offer new courses that, particularly with law courses. University of Liverpool, for example, have got a new initiative where they are putting their law students into industry for a year between their second and third year. So year 3 is then a placement year, and then year 4 you go back in and do essentially what would have been year 3. And I'm sure there are other universities with other disciplines and courses doing similar things. Law firms, and we're included in this because we're participating in it with Liverpool University next year, but law firms are certainly open to this, because one really good thing that it does is it works both ways. So if a placement student comes in for, it's either a year or an academic year, they get to see what the firm's like. The firm gets to obviously get to know and build a relationship with that person. Once they've finished their undergraduate course, it's a really good way to have that connection with the firm, and if you really enjoyed it, you can go back. Or alternatively, perhaps you realise that wasn't the area of the law for you, and you can tailor your QWE to make sure that it's a different area potentially than what you saw. So where it is an option, I believe it's very popular already, but certainly it's something to consider. Whether or not a firm can't, as we said, a firm can't say no to whether it's qualifying work experience, but whether or not a firm would then say, oh well, we won't put you on our full 2-year course, where we sponsor you for this course, might be a different question, because
I think that's right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just mindful of the time, Lauren. I think you've answered that very fully. Thank you. I think a firm will probably not want to count the majority of years that are undertaken as a sandwich year, or whatever you want to call it, during a law degree course, because there has to be some question as to what was the level that the candidate was actually working at, what knowledge.
Do you mind, Johnny, if I add something there? Because I can very briefly. Yes, because I totally agree with you. At the end of the day, I've seen many candidates interviewing with us and having experienced quality work during those sandwich years. However, candidates should always focus on the quality of that QWE. If that sandwich year entails some document review, some admin level experience, at the end of the day, you want to get really good quality experience that helps you get the NQ role you really want. So doing 2 years of document review, of course it will do, of course it will count as QWE, but it may not help you secure the NQ role you ultimately want. So ultimately, yes, it's easy to qualify that way because you gather QWE, but it may not be easy to secure your dream NQ role without having gained good quality QWE. So that's something to keep in mind, I would say.
Great stuff. I'm mindful that we'll run out of time, Bethany. I just wanted to answer one question right at the end, that somebody said they've been an estate agent for the last 2 years. Will that count? Well, it doesn't sound like it would do. The type of work you're doing is unlikely to be mapped or mappable to the solicitor competencies, and therefore, even though it's working in a quasi-legal space, and I'm a property lawyer, a lot of estate agents know quite a lot of property law, but that's very unlikely to be working towards the necessary competencies. goodness, I'm not even got time to ask for the final closing tip, do I, Bethany? Because we have run over.
Sorry, we've run out of time.
I know, but thank you, everybody on the panel. Thank you, Chloe, for giving us the student perspective. It's been fantastic to hear from you. Thank you from Olivia from Flex, and Andrea from AccuTrainee, and Lauren from In-House Legal Solutions for all your perspective. I just want to leave you with just a parting shot and say, first of all, thank you all for attending. It's a long journey, the SQE QWE route. It's not a race to qualify. I think what the message that's been consistent across the panel is, don't rush, take your time, and above all, look to make sure that the training you get is good quality, because ultimately, as Andrea mentioned, last point there, getting that newly qualified role, that NQE role, is as important, if not more important, because that will set you then up for the rest of your career. And if you limit yourself from your QWE, you're going to be limiting your career opportunities on qualification. There we go. Thank you very much, panel. You've been fabulous.
Thank you, everyone.
Bethany, I'll hand over to you.
Yep, nothing really to say for me apart from just quickly is that I have popped a link. I know lots of people have lots of QWE questions. We have a whole FAQs page on Law Careers.net, so I think lots of your questions will be answered there, but especially about the backdating and what counts as QWE. So please do check that out. And there's a link going out on the follow-up email tomorrow. But yes, great. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you at our next masterclass. Thank you.